Oh my. Today's episode, I'm not even joking, is like one that is, I could not wait to get this one recorded. Today's guest, David McMillan. Some of you may know who he is after his very well documented story of his career, which just so happened to be in drug smuggling. And on top of that, he also broke out of a maximum security prison in Thailand. He is the only Western person to ever do it and never get returned. He was on death row and was literally going to get shot to death because of the crimes that he committed. But in a clever act, managed to escape by walking literally out the front door. And today we're going to get into the brain of David and actually, obviously crime is not something that we condone on the podcast, but when you break it down and you take out the business, there's times where he was making up to $1.8 million per month. That is frightening figures. And if anyone else did that in the business world, they'd be classed as a hero or, one of the top entrepreneurs in the world. So we're actually going to share that story today, but in a very different way, about like really digging into the business side of things and how he was able to be so successful in that business world, and also share his story along the way, because obviously, like most stories, there was lots of trauma, heartache as well, that it wasn't just all success, as you can imagine with the sort of story that we're about to hear. So honestly, like it's a really different type of podcast this week, but my oh my, am I so excited. David McMillan.
Well, just in overview, I started out really very far from crime. I was a cameraman for a while, and then I worked in advertising, but even that was too dishonest for me. And then by chance met a bunch of very old school safecrackers. And that all came together after they'd retired and started saying, well, they put a lot of their money into buying loads of weed or whatever was available. But this was in Australia, being a closed sort of world and a very insular world, of course, there weren't great margins for them. So I kind of looked at it. I thought about it before, even in my teens. I remember going to the State Library and looking up a question you'd probably ask Alexa or Google these days. What is the greatest profit margin of anything in the world? And the answer was, well, actually it was from the Guinness Book of Records. The wholesale price of opium in the fields of Turkey compared with the street price of heroin in New York City is 100,000% or something crazy like that. Well,
wow.
I wasn't going to.
That information was in the Guinness World Record book.
Yes, it was a much more. It was a less touchy-feely, gooey kind of book. Just straight to the facts, man. In a different world, really heavy drugs for kind of, it was something you wouldn't involve yourself in because apart from the danger, the risks, the penalties, people got into trouble with them. But if we cast our mind back to the 1970s, it was, what are we talking about, 50 years ago now, between 40 and 50 years. It seems like a blinking of an eye to me, but in a way, the whole society was very much different. Can you imagine? It came out of the revolutionary 60s when people in the suburbs were catching up with the Abbie Hoffmans and the front runners and these things. But there was a real sense that what that generation was going to do was discard the old world. So the idea of people being able to do whatever they want, take on all the vices that they might like, recreate law and society. Of course, it was all a ridiculously, somewhat arrogant, naive, youthful thing. We had a grocery shop that used to sell some Thai sticks under the counter and tomatoes on top of the counter. And there'd be kind of hippie-ish discussions about, well, should we put 25 cents on that, to cover our costs and all that, that kind of, this was a very different attitude of going into the narcotics trade than what you got a few years ago, which was, young guys saying, yeah, I'll do that. I'm just going to run down to the hardware shop and get a chainsaw and a splash guard, because I'll be cutting up my competition. If we think of how media viewed drugs back in the 50s and early 60s, it almost wasn't there. They had some kind of feverish jazz guy from who'd somehow get into this mysterious drug things and be hooked for life. And then there was nothing. But then when it became a hugely profitable thing, which in turn led to big sentences against it, it became a story worth running movies about. The whole drug world was it was invented because of a prohibition, wasn't it? So, yeah, they should try and stop you. But here, there's a bunch of bureaucrats really aiming to kill you or to have you in prison forever in some dungeon somewhere. And for what? Because of the thing itself? No, there were licensed people selling that. So it was kind of a fine line. And some of us amongst us had drug habits and got off it and on it. And
you say that though, but just to kind of counter argue that point is
challenge me.
Obviously with drugs is, and we'll get on to kind of what drugs you were that you like kind of let's say specialized in or trafficked, but the problem is they have long lasting effects on people's lives, right? Because they abuse it and stuff. And I think probably, do you not think that's where all the sentencing would come from, is just the amount of people's lives that it ruins?
I don't know that sentencing ever bears any relationship to the damage done. After all, a stalker might get at the very most 12 months, but he could, in fact, ruin this person's life. But the charges of making annoying phone calls or appearing at the window or stealing the underwear or whatever it might be, never quite, never quite balance, do that. So I can't really defend myself without seeming like, well, he's just trying to justify all of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sentencing, now there are most people can handle their intoxicants. They can handle their booze. They can they don't roll up a number first thing in the morning and wipe themselves out and can't get through the day. No, some people are pretty dedicated. That, why is it? I could never quite work out why there were some categories, say cocaine, which on the numbers doesn't seem terribly destructive. If we looked up how many people died from a cocaine overdose, the number would be very low.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we both know perfectly well that people with an inability to subject any will on their lives can easily ruin themselves like mad gamblers.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't ban booze or gambling on account of that.
Because they take so much money, right? They make so much money from it, from taxes and stuff.
I think sentencing always seems to parallel how evil the person appears. And now, if there was very little money in narcotics, for whatever reason, it was grown in every country, and you just about trip over it, and there wasn't much money, it would be the same. But because you couldn't do any better at controlling its supply because it seemed to be everywhere, it popped out of the ground. I think there's a famous case of somebody who died from ecstasy, and she was a sympathetic teenager. So you've got to blame somebody. Blame the party where she went to and was given that pill. I think trying to find a villain for the relatively small number of people who are so determined to destroy their lives is no solution.
Yeah.
But certainly the sentences go very high when the illegality of it pushes up the high value of it. Now, oddly enough, even in one of the cheapest drugs, really, in terms of maintaining a habit, would probably have to be in the UK, heroin of all things. They sell a 10-pound bag, and somebody can stop getting sick just by taking that every day. So that's not a huge amount of money. It's nothing like a Coke thing, but it's a different world. See, people don't know anybody involved in it. They don't know that 2 or 3 times I ended up stuck in hotel rooms, and because there was a little bag around of China White there, I got myself a habit. Now, I shook it off. I saw it for what it was, or I let it run and then had to take more serious steps. But there's also links made that don't really exist.
Yeah.
A lot of, you'll find in the magistrates' courts where all the guys are downstairs in the cells, a little argument going on where some people are saying, stop going up into that courtroom and saying, I had to pay for my drug habit, so that's why I robbed Granny and stole the silverware or whatever I did. Sure, it's a defense, but if you look at the cost of getting yourself that habit, that cost of doing so was so high that you must have been a crook before you ever did it. In other words, you must have been stealing X amount of money to get yourself into that position, and then been able to afford to buy everything to make yourself somehow. So they weren't converted into thieves by that. But it really, look, the facts of it don't matter. I think given my life to live over again, I wouldn't choose this for a living. It was too damaging, too awful. Besides, looking back on it, I would have been happier doing something technical, maybe some science-related thing. That would have been fun. But I was an impatient little bastard at that age, at 20. I wasn't having any of that. I tore straight off to India and bought 6 kilos of hash over there. I had some complicated scheme to get it back. I'd exported a piece of television equipment, and that had 10 kilos of lead in it. I was to dump the lead and then fill up the thing. All of that fell to pieces through not doing a dry run. I couldn't afford to in those days. So all I could do in the end was stuff it into a 1950s Grundig valve radio that I had eviscerated. It was completely empty. And
you took it all apart yourself?
Yeah, this guy came. I had no connections. I ended up trying to score off the Shoeshine boys in New Delhi. Then my one contact I had, I suppose, was some villain bank robber who'd run away and joined the Hare Krishnas. And so I went down to their ashram and met some of the people there. Very weird, very strange. I was allowed to sit in the presence of His Divine Grace Sri Prabhupada Bumpme, or whatever his name was. I had 20 minutes there, and my host said, "Well, did that change your life?" It did for me, when I was in it. Well, during that 20 minutes, he ordered a Coca-Cola to drink and scratched his ass. So that didn't really change my life, no. Yeah. But they could have sorted me out, but it was kind of too biggish. When I was kind of shocked by my crook friends who, when they saw that I actually came back with this 6 kilo of hash, said, "Wow, we never thought we'd see you again. Anyway, why didn't you bring back the hard stuff? Yeah, but you've been lecturing me for the last 2 years about junkie scum and all of that and that. Yeah, but now that you can do it, I thought, all right, okay. So this has all been a charade. I went on to set up a base in Thailand. Kind of scooped my contact off the really, I wouldn't say I found him in the streets, but one link to another got me him, and he was very poor when I met him, but quite well off when we parted years later. My wife was nagging in my ear. I'd married an Italian girl whose father had restaurants in Melbourne. So
I think in the film that you're in, Cecilia, correct?
Yeah, Clelia is her name. Yes.
Okay.
And she, so I went into that pressure, and I found some people who I thought would be pretty good for it, because I sat out at airports and watched the people who got stopped and didn't get stopped. I had probably about 5 or 6 couriers, but I'd be like some, what would you call it, helicopter parent, worrying about them all the time. So I'd be on the same flight as they would, because I knew that any choice, if something happened slightly differently than I'd explained would, a corridor, a choice, or a turn, or a counter, and they had to make a choice, it would always be the wrong one. So I'd have to be there for it.
So when people were smuggling for you, you would join them.
Oh, I wasn't going to let them wander off on their own. Anything could happen, and usually did when I left them to their own devices.
Wow.
One of them, it was quite a learning curve to figure out the world of couriers, and it's kind of a lesson in what people are like, really. But I'll come back to that because it's kind of interesting. I did that for a few years, then picked up on some surveillance, and what had happened, I'd really retired at the ripe old age of 24. Yet my business partner was getting he was getting stuff from what would you call him, a traveling salesman, a Thai businessman from Chiang Mai, who was bringing it in cutlery boxes and giving it to him. He was under surveillance, so the two teams joined together into a state federal task force, and they were swooping upon us, but they didn't get anywhere. Nonetheless, they arrested us all. It was a lot, because there were no drugs. It was a vicious trial, fight. Yeah. Pressure was on. They arrested all the families because we wouldn't talk. My wife clearly was arrested. Michael's wife, Mary, was arrested. Baby was only about 8 weeks old or something at the time. The baby didn't go into the prison with her. And then they put an informer in the jail that the girls were being held in, hoping to get some admissions. And they quite often do that in cases where it's a difficult prosecution. They'll have somebody, well, I was in his jail cell and he told me this, that sort of thing. And that didn't come to anything, because in their choice of informers, this little Danielle, she was also an arsonist and quite like lighting fires. Well, and that she did. In those days, there was no TVs or radios in prisons, and I did hear on the prison loudspeaker, which switches off at 11 at night, that there'd been a fire at the women's prison. It was a long night, because they said that 3 women had died. I ran out to ask the guards in the morning, well, who? And they looked all over the place.
Did they know?
Yeah, they knew. They just were too embarrassed to say anything. Clelia died. So had Michael's wife. And then Michael and I just kind of went into a dark tunnel there. But to make our life even more difficult, we were put in maximum security, or supermax, for the duration of the trial. Because the prosecution and police saw it as a good opportunity to frighten the other couriers who had said nothing, into
Trying to
coming
get them
over
to
to the
talk.
police side. Yeah. They said, well, you know, these guys had their wives killed. That's how ruthless they are. And you're next. So nonetheless, so we had 6 or 7 indemnified witnesses, couriers and others, who were saying, oh, yes, I work for David and he paid me 20,000 per run. Did you ever see it? No. Well, how do you know it was that? Well, he said so. Did he? Well, I never really did, but that's beside the point. In the beginning, I didn't even really care about the trial, but I pulled myself together and I had an opportunity to escape from the Supermax there, which was a long night, and 6 guys did get out. But I wanted to see how the trial went. Out of the 12 counts, I was acquitted of all of them except for one, but that was enough for the judge. He gave me 15 years. I also, we'd been, after a year previously, we got out of the Supermax and we were in another section, and then were charged with, or I was charged anyway, with planning a helicopter escape. They, across the newspapers, it said that former SAS commando had been arrested at a Melbourne hotel, and they did a reenactment with a helicopter and the police chopper following and filming the thing. This story broke about a week before the drugs trial started, and the story ran for a bit. And I know that the jury in our case were not only aware of it, they even gave them complimentary copies of the newspaper about it. You know?
Yeah.
Drug fort or drug dealer to escape by helicopter. It was all a load of nonsense. Now, I survived the Supermax there, dropped down in category through the jail system, ended up in a kind of weird open prison country house. 10 years have passed. Just before I'm due for release, the same policemen in my case come to visit me. They give me back some load of crap, some old radios and transmitting equipment I had. Looking forward, they said, to the day I would be released. And I was getting home leaves going out on the weekends then. They were behind me as soon as I left the prison. Fine, let them do that. But when I was released...
Were they coming for you then, again?
Oh, yes, they were quite determined about it. They set up a watching station. I got an office when I got out, and they were there. They bugged the place. They bugged my apartment that I got, but they were with me all the time. It was strange. In some of there were times in the prison I had more freedom than when I'd been released. I was on my way out to see Clelia's graveside, but the closer I got, the more surveillance I picked up, and I couldn't bring myself to close the last, 50 feet between the grounds and her grave, because I was surrounded by the surveillance. It was a bit like worse somehow than the prison guards. The prison guards just wanted to keep me. These people wanted to do me harm. I didn't feel I could stand in front of her grave with my, by then, sworn enemy standing with me. People I blamed for, in part, I blamed myself. I was responsible after all. I shouldn't have let her be in that position. But so I melted back into the crowd and then went full kind of underground. I just went into a lot of trouble to get new documents and left the country. I got to Thailand, felt actually genuinely free for the first time in 20 or 15 years or so. Unfortunately, I was in touch with the old traveling salesman, the one who brought the cutlery boxes to Australia. I met him briefly for coffee, saw my real contact from the old days who gave me 50,000 so that I could keep moving. It was booked to go out, but as I went to the airport, I could see everything had changed. By seeing the guy from Chiang Mai, they'd found out what hotel I was in. It was at the Oriental, which is protected from police, but only on the inside. I suddenly saw at the airport that they were everywhere. There was no choice but to back away and melt back into the crowd again. And I sank back down. I took my bag, and I had an extra passport in there, some money. But it was a very bitter pill to swallow. I thought I'd gotten away from all the people that had been pursuing me all those years. And it was like I'd held my breath the moment I went into prison. I'd had no other people in their cells had photos of family and friends. I had nothing in there, nothing. I didn't want to be alive until I was free. And then I'd been freed, but not. Then I left the country and freed, but not. It was a lot to kind of say goodbye. So I let my local contacts know that I rang their numbers knowing their phones would be tapped, and told them some story about taking the train down to Malaysia, even though that was not my plan. But I didn't realize the extent to which they were all over him, and also had a live tap on the phone, not just when they listened to the tapes later. So when I went to a travel agency to use their telephones, I was only going to call my mother to say, well, you won't see me for who knows how long. As soon as I walked into that travel agency, they were there. They descended on me. They took me away. They were happy enough with charging me with a false passport, stealing the money. But they did a bit of a sweep of the airport floor and scooped up enough drugs to get a death sentence. You only need 25 grams at an airport in Thailand to attract the death penalty. I forget what they found, 68 or something. It wasn't mine. It would have been a lot bigger if it was something like that. It wouldn't have been.
So you didn't have any drugs with you at all in the airport?
No. There was. I saw a couple of people I'd known that day, and I signaled one of them that it was a hot place to be, and he'd disappeared. But I wasn't part of anything. Certainly, the minimum I would have ever had anyway was a few kilos. So anyway, I was so utterly depressed and broken by this arrest there. It was 3 days before Christmas. I was in a dungeon in the narcotics division cells in Chinatown. They're deep underground, and you get a little grill plate sitting up the top, and you can hear the traffic, the wheels passing by, and the gutters and the sounds. But other than that, there's no life. There's just next to you on grass mats, the fallen and depressed people have been scooped up at the airport. One poor guy from he was Ghanaian, but he was on a Nigerian passport, I think, or it was the other way around. And he sent on a suicide mission to pick up some air conditioning units, which were full of drugs. He was finished. Swiss Freddy was in there too. He tried to kill himself with 140 Rohypnol. Now, you think that'd do the job, wouldn't you? Didn't stir for 2 or 3 days.
He tried to kill himself with 140 Rohypnol.
Yeah, I know.
And he didn't die?
No.
I bet the hangover off that must have been something chronic.
He was just crawling over towards Freddie. Obviously, I was being polite. There was a bit of protocol when somebody tries to kill himself in a Bangkok prison cell. You let them get on with it. But you can hardly shake them and say, there's so much to live for, Freddie. Look, it's Christmas. Those old Chinese gamblers also, and there were 7 Chinese guys there that had all been arrested. And they knew what I didn't know anything about, that you've got 7 days in those cells to get yourself out of trouble. That's your time to bargain. Do not involve your embassy. Do not involve anybody else. The Chinese guys, they actually brought me a Christmas cake. It was disgusting, but that was a nice thought. Amongst themselves, they were playing a card game as to who would take the fall for their stuff. They'd been driving around town. It was in the back of a truck, and they'd all been scooped out. They'd I don't know whether it was the one who wasn't a very good bridge player, but somebody was taking the fall, and that was all arranged. The 6 of them got out, and the one stayed. But on the Swiss race, no, he survived. He just needed fluids. But I did realize, because I was going to join him in that, but I just wanted to. I thought if 2 of us are lying there dead, it's they're going to somebody will come along and disturb us. The woman who was coming in to see me, she was a friend of another cellmate, buying me like blankets and stuff I'd need. She wouldn't get me those pills. She was a bit of a smart woman of the street, you could say, been around a bit, in her late 40s. When I asked for that many, she had a little look on her face, which was, no, I know what you've got in mind. I've seen this before. Anyway, so I suppose you could say her scruples there didn't allow her to see me off that way. But and I couldn't do any deal there. I had foreigners all over me, British, Australian, Americans. Even when I got to the prison, I'd been at the court and the people running around in these heavy chains on their ankles, and I'm asking about that. I'm starting to liven up a little bit to find out what the hell I'm facing here. Now, when I got into the prison, the plan was to escape, but not to run away anywhere. I just wanted to end it all. And you can't kill yourself in a Thai prison. You don't have the privacy. The cells are like dormitories that were built for, 40 to 60 people. They have over 130, 140 people in them. They're packed like sardines, top to tail. It's almost like that.
Yeah.
You have about a foot. And the people who have been sentenced to life or death, they come and chain them up every night. Anybody whose case was over, over 20 grams or something, you have to wear chains all the time. But I managed to get out of that. But really, it was only in the beginning, was just, I had so much enough of this. I mean, I was getting on now to in my 30s, late 30s. And I just didn't want to play anymore. But things transformed to one to another. It was a Bostonian con man who kind of kept me alive with the hope of various scams. I knew he was trying to con me, but anyway, I realized as time went on, 1 year, 2 years, that the trial never finishes, that I'd have to get myself out. I probably had 27 different escape plans, and I eventually realized I'd have to do it all myself. The old-fashioned way: get the hacksaw blades, cut open the bars, find a way of getting a rope, get over the walls. But this was a huge place. Daniel, I looked at a picture of it the other day. I used to think there was about 12,000 people in there, maybe 8. But the numbers I was getting was just from Klong Prem prison within the prison itself. But if you Google Earth the thing and take a look at it, it's a huge, I was just about to see it from space. You certainly could see it from the International Space Station. Wow. It holds 22,000 people, all surrounded by a moat. And the outer wall is probably 26, 27 feet high. Very tall, and it's got electrified barbed wire running around the edges, and yet another moat down below. It was kind of lucky that I didn't know really what the odds were against me. I was even building a matchstick model of the prison under my little desk there. Oh, by the way, when you get organized in a Thai prison, providing you're not completely friendless, which a lot of them were, having messed up their lives, for about $500 a month, you can live reasonably well. And I spent a little bit more and had my own kind of office under the little industrial huts they have down there. Had a little group of servants, I guess you could say. But really, I mean, there was a carpenter. He never did anything. Noel was a French guy. He was a cook. He was pretty good. Some of the local boys to pick up the ice in the morning and pick up the food. So I was kind of left in peace, pretty much. I was the only one who could go back into the main part of the prison during the day. I gave my 8 ATM cards to the local chief guard, and he, for an honest 10%, would bring me back cash.
Yeah.
When I finally got out of there that morning, which instead of being at 2:00 in the morning was just about 6:00 as the place was opening up, I thought I thought they'd see the ladder that I built against the wall. I thought they'd see the rope hanging down the other side, but they never did. They were convinced I was still somehow within the prison. Somebody who was still there, a Scottish guy who was in the prison at the time, said the guards were roaming around the prison calling out my name, which in that prison was Daniel Westlake, like looking for a lost sheep or something like that. I guess they couldn't believe that I would disappoint them so much by wanting to leave when I had everything. My Chinese Lao friend who'd arranged my passport to get out of the country, he'd begged me not to even try it, because it has to be admitted the previous attempts at all met in dismal failure and death for the ones that tried.
They'll get killed straight away.
In the remand section of the prison, 4 guys that tried to get out of there, they extraordinarily enough got out of the dormitory by cutting their wire mesh on it, and then went down to near the kitchens, and they'd all lied to each other about what they had. Where's that phone you were talking about? Don't have it. Where's the rope? Don't have it. Do you know where you are? Not a clue. Because it is very hard to find your way around. And even when I'd got out of cut the bar in the cell, and I would say, I will come back tomorrow night and finish the job, said Sten, my Viking Swedish friend in the cell. No. As much as I control that cell, there's no way this would stay a secret overnight or during the next day. So it was late when I was getting out. But even within the first hour, when I'd got to the outside ground and got my little tools that I thought I might need, I had no real idea where I was. I had to build a ladder out of two long bamboo poles they had in one of the factories that made little paper gifts for Chinese funerals. And they were very, like 3 inches at the base and an inch at the top, these bamboo poles.
Yeah.
Laid down 4 of them. Sten had been pretending an interest in oil painting for the previous 6 months, and he'd made me these really solid rectangular picture frames, and they became the rungs of this ladder. The picture frames went between the bamboo poles. I used gaffer tape to put all that together, and cable ties. All this stuff I had came because they were sent in care packages that they let the foreigners have. I had a huge one sent in with Fortnum & Mason's canned goods and jams, clothing, cartons of cigarettes, some of which I gave to the guards searching it, and the hacksaw blades, which were hidden in a scroll. It looked like a religious poster that my friend Michael had made. Now, here's something for your viewers. Imagine, and Daniel, I phone you one night. You say, David, I heard you were locked up in some Thai prison. Yeah, indeed, Daniel, I am. But listen, I've got to speak quickly because I'm not supposed to be on this illegal phone. I need you to do something. Yeah. Okay. I want you to get 4 tungsten tipped hacksaw blades. I want you to get some wooden dowel, cut a groove lengthways down into the dowel, put them inside, and then glue all of that up. make some kind of religious-y poster. These dowel rods will be the top and bottom of the scroll, paint the whole thing, gold lacquer it, and post that off to me in Thailand with all this other stuff as a smoke screen. Oh, and one last thing, because I don't want the guys looking at this poster too closely because they'll be a bit heavy. I want you to go out and get the most rank pornography you can ever find to dazzle the guard's mind. Now, and that worked a charm. They started to look at some of the other stuff, and the dowel rods were quite heavy with this steel in them. But when they saw this pornography, you know, teenage anal number 17 or something like that. Oh, Daniel, no. I mean, as much as they wanted to help me, and I'm giving them cigarettes, no, cannot. Very carefully dusting it off and putting it under their chair so that it wouldn't get damaged for later inspection. Now, somebody's made that phone call to you. Oh, gotta go, I say, in the next couple of weeks, if you can, click. What do you make of all of that? Do you go and do it?
It depends. If you're like one of my best friends or my brother or something like that, of course, I wouldn't even think twice about it, because you don't even think about why that person needs it. You just do that for them. So yeah, in answer to your question, yeah, if you was close enough to me, 100%. But before we get on to the actual like escaping from prison, so
I just wanted to say that when I did get out of there, I went to Singapore and then to Baluchistan in Pakistan. I was under the care of my old friend Nurjan Magsi, a tribal lord I'd met in the 70s while doing some hash business there. I went back into trade, did business in Scandinavia, was running coke out of South America. All of that, rebuilt another life, was kind of this retiring business. Very dangerous affair, Daniel. I don't recommend it, because if you're up to some kind of scurrilous mischief, and then you say, right, I've had enough risk taking, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's when you're really in danger. And that's when I got the call about from my friend Nurjan saying his cousin had been kidnapped over there, and could I take a look at it? Well, I thought it was just another one of Nurjan's schemes to get money, and perhaps it was. But I did end up in crossing the border from Afghanistan and Pakistan into Afghanistan, and with a lot of effort, managed to get the cousin back, who'd been, apparently the uncle owed a lot of money. That's why the cousin was taken in the first place. He was traded, because no money was paid for him, he was sold to another bunch of well, they're like Taliban. I mean, I've always said it, the Taliban aren't a cohesive organization. They're just like 800 different groups of cutthroat thieves. All that religious nonsense, just shit. And they only go on like that because they're hillbillies anyway. So managed to get him back, but I'd attracted the attention of one of my old nemesis from the American DEA, and he made it his business to see that I'd get arrested in Pakistan as I was heading off. No drugs involved in any case, but they tried to tie me up with a group that was operating out of Finland and Estonia and Denmark. And the connection between me and all of that was somebody I'd known who used to get me passports. Had been arrested for something and couldn't think of anybody more villainous than me to throw in to the mix. Nothing had happened for months over that, but because I was there, see if that would fit me as a little suit. Went to trial for that. Was thinking of escaping, but if we ever get around to talking about it, you don't escape anywhere. I'm just dealing with kidnapping before. If somebody helped me get out of there, and you wouldn't need much help, actually, you just walk away from the court. I'd be leaving the confines of the jail and coming into the hands of people who definitely want some form of big payment.
Yeah.
And would they ever let the golden goose go? I don't know. So then managed to get out of that. I was found not guilty in the end. I was freed in in Pakistan, did a little more trade over the years after that in South America, but kind of by early 2000s, my heart wasn't in it. I was getting too old for it. And
Yeah.
I didn't really have I just didn't want another big stretch or, I'd seen enough. I mean, that Karachi thing had cost me an experience with being tortured in a dungeon that I wouldn't want upon anybody. Sometimes you ask yourself a question like, I wonder how I'd cope with being tortured. Well, it's a stupid thing to ask yourself, really. Badly, everybody would. And luckily, it wasn't that systematic, long, ongoing thing, because I could see that it would really rewire the brain. And it seems to me one of the most evil things that any human being can do to another. But anyway, learned a lot of things from Afghanistan and Pakistan that far transcended anything in Thailand. And about various other countries, but kind of settled down to a calmer life, wrote Escape, the book about getting out of the Thai prison.
Yeah.
And the new one, Unforgiving Destiny, which kind of covers my entire life in a way, which is probably probably a better one, actually, in a way, because it, the events in Thailand were so weird in a way and unusual. I couldn't think of a way to tell that story. I picked up a half dozen of those books that people write about that sort of thing, all self-serving. One, she's found God. Another one's, also claiming innocence. I thought, I'm not going to do anything like that. I'll be a Humphrey Bogart in this. I won't even say anything about myself. It'll all be through.
Okay, so you obviously, like you say, I mean, for me, I look at you, and from the conversations that we've had, even today and before that, you're obviously like a very intelligent person. I think even if you changed,
I'm gonna have to get arrested though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not intelligent, but not that intelligent to get arrested. But no, obviously, with that though, like, let's go back to like kind of like you then when you were younger, because obviously no one's ever born. They just kind of find their way into things, right? So as a kid, I've watched your film because you obviously, like, as you mentioned, you've got a couple of books. You've got Escape and the is it the Unforgiving Destiny for Relentless Pursuit of a Black-Marketeer? Yeah, and then you've also got a film, The Man Who Got Away.
Well, it's not really my film. It was a slightly cheap Australian TV movie made.
Yeah, and based in my life. And from what I understand your story as well, it's kind of a little bit one-sided. Like they've kind of twisted it a little bit to make you seem a lot worse than what you actually are or what you was actually doing. But
certainly a different character anyway.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. But with that, like you as a child, like did you enjoy school? Did you enjoy that sort of like, because you obviously know a lot of stuff. Somebody who is also been in prison, a good percentage of their life, you seem to know a lot of stuff.
Well, I'm old. That's why.
But in terms of growing up though, did you enjoy that kind of like academic side of things? Were you quite
I was geeky in a way, but also I suppose my mother was a bit of a socialite in a way. She had a lot of classy sort of friends that she expected things of her children to, I suppose, be entertaining as apart from anything else, and well-mannered. Even some policemen say they've been the most well-mannered prisoner they've ever had. There's no point being grumpy about it. I wasn't a loner by any ways, but I rather enjoyed my own company. I used to collect matchbox labels, and they used to come in sets of 64 back in those days. And it was quite a thing for a kid to do. But the search for them, I liked alone. Yet I had at school a little gang. And they weren't like a gang of mobsters. They were just a bunch of kids who were friends. But they elected me leader of it for some reason. And so I was social in another way. And I got a job reading kids' news at 12 years old. And I suppose I got that job simply because I could read a couple of lines of typewritten material and remember it long enough to say it. They didn't have auto cues in those days. So I had a paper script. So I haven't got the usual excuses of being in crime that most people have, that a deprived childhood or anything like that, and would have quite liked to have completed higher education and done something, really something scientific, because that's what I used to enjoy as much as anything. But I was just too impatient. I wanted absolute control of my teenage life, and I could see I could never get it. I remember I ran away. My mother was off somewhere in New York, I think, and we had a house guest. She was a nurse from Sydney. She was 21. I was 13. Anyway, when it came time for her to drive back to New South Wales, where she came from, I went with her. So I eloped with a 21-year-old, and I found it really annoying when they got me back to be at a dinner party a few months later and having everything kind of dismissed as, well, yes, of course she wouldn't have seen anything in a child. It was just somebody that flattered her for the attention, as though I wasn't there. And even I'd earned enough money reading the news thing to afford a private school that I went to. But it was a great disappointment. All boys too. How weird's that? And I knew it became obvious that I'd need to have a lot of money if I really wanted absolute control over things. But, when I did first start to get that, it was somehow disappointing. It was when I'd get back with the cargo, especially when I was doing it myself, if there were others involved, making sure that they were safe and put away where they couldn't cause any more damage was one thing. But when it'd be successful, I'd look at that stuff, whatever it might be, hash, coke, smack, and I didn't want to hand it on. It was like I'd be apologizing to those solidly pressed blocks of Charlie. Look, it's time for you and I to say goodbye to each other. I'm sorry you're going into, bad parents now. They're going to jump up and down on you all, and you'll be mixed with real low-life ephedrines and cutting agents, and you'll be treated so badly. I can't even tell you.
So it was almost like almost like a pet for you. Like your product was like you had like an emotional connection to it.
I did. I mean, I used to look at the little pearly flakes of it and the shiny bits, or even after a while, it become very good. I think even today I could smell product of just about any category of drug, and if I was wrong about where it came from and how good it remained, I'd be surprised. It was, and then the money came in, and I found myself early on with a house with almost no furniture, big piles of banknotes stacked up on a glass.
How much money were you making at the beginning then?
Oh, a huge lot. There was such a price differential. Also, one of my early safecracking business partners who'd, they really kind of enjoyed. I think I was telling you the other day that they enjoyed it as much when things would go wrong and they'd have to send more money than when it went too smoothly. They got bored. But when I'd pop out of nowhere and say, "What, you got it? no, you're getting it still stuck somewhere in a warehouse and such, and it's locked up because of this.
Yeah. But like
Oh, and they
if we were to say like actual numbers in terms of, so just so we can give the audience an idea of like the money that you were making at
oh,
that
I
age.
see. All right, probably not that much really. 3-4 million a year or something.
Oh, so not that much, no.
No,
but
no.
and you were how old?
That would have been from the age of 20.
20. So you was making 4 million quid profit in your pocket, yeah?
Yeah. That's why I got distracted there. Instead of as a protective measure, and I've never heard of it since, so I'll mention it. Instead of, there's two ways you can deal with that. If you've got a big lump of something, you can go to somebody who's, slightly upper level player, but has some other kind of life, not some out and out villain from Manchester. That's what he is. That's on his business card, villain, ruthless. But one of those, I don't know, 50 or 60 Londoners that have scaffolding businesses and, interests in the building trade and property. They do a bit of moonlighting on the side for that. They're good because you can just dump it with them and say, I'll catch you later. There's no meetings and in cars. There's no talk about anything. It's just there it is. And you get the money whenever, maybe in a couple of lumps, but you know it's there. Now, it takes a while to accumulate people of such trust. But we didn't do that in the beginning. We actually went street level. Rocky, my business partner from back then, got all the more organized junkies, you could say, the guys who had it, their lives together and used to do a lot of trade on the street, and then set up a house. So it was really, in a very strange kind of way, coming all the way from over there, not getting cut or stamped on or anyway, put into capsules and then going out. Now that made a lot of money. For each kilo, it would be about $700,000. But
you would get $700,000 for
no,
a
not
kilo.
me. I'd split it with him.
Oh yeah. But that's the sort of money you were making off of 1 kilo.
Yeah, doing it in that particular way. But as I say, it was an unusual circumstances. Here's a bit of a business dilemma. Now, we've got some fat slob turkey who's got a house around town to call it Dope Central. And the street guys are coming down every half an hour to pick up again. So you don't want that at your place, do you? No. So what's this guy's job? Nothing. We're mostly there. And if we're not there, we'll let this guy whose house it is drop off these bottles and collect the money, and the next day go down and pick the money off from him. What do you pay a guy like that? All right, what's he doing risk-wise? A little, so he gets paid very well, and he was paid about $30,000 a week. That's back in the 70s. That was a lot of money. But here's the problem. He is seeing hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes in one night over 100,000. And I remember him saying to me, I mean, he worked at the council swimming pool, like sat in the boiler room and drank, slept off his drinking. And that was his life. Dragged him out of there, ended up buying a house and marrying some slag. Anyway, all his other virtues put aside for a minute, he said to me, look, this sounds good. Next time you go over there, can I put some money in? Money into what? Into the venture, into the thing, the run. I said, well, look, why not take it all and you go over there and do it? I couldn't do that. But we don't need the money, so I don't know quite what to. All right, could you tell me how I could put it together? I've got this idiot over here that I've found in the gutter, and if I clean him up a bit, I think he could do a run. Could you, if I send him over there, can you load him up? I mean, what do you do with people? I've even had I had somebody who was his life was a mess. He had been in the weed business, but wannabe gangsters, just idiots, really, had found out about him and came in robbing his place. Well, when I met him, I mean, I knew some of these idiots from prison over there. So I told them to stop being nasty and fuck off. He started doing some trips with me, probably 3 or 4 of them. So he's getting up to around $100,000 by then. And what? Of course, he wants to do his own. So I said, how? Okay, free world, you can do what you want.
So he was getting a bit greedy, wanted a bigger portion of the
really.
pie.
He probably thought it was an absolutely reasonable thing. But I said, how are you going to do it? Well, I mean, he was close enough to everything to know that it was at that time in stereo tuners and the wooden surrounds of it. Well, if you've got an old one of those that you're finished with, well, I said, just a minute, they don't really get old. I mean, I reuse them until they'd fall to pieces, but all right, let's put that aside. And where would you be getting this stuff that you want to get? Well, I was going to say if you could give me the number of your guy, or even better, when you're going over there to get your next lot, I'll come over and you can get mine at the same time. Right. And the passports? Well, yeah, I know you got one from me. Could you get one from the guy that I'd be going with? Right. Now, when it comes back, how would you be getting rid of this? I mean, the last time you did any business, villains came through your front door with a shotgun and took it all off you.
Yeah.
And the only reason they're not now is because I told them to go away. Well, yeah, no, I'll move and go somewhere else. But that is a good point. What if I gave it to you and I give you a big discount on what it's worth? So you can see where this is headed. I should have said, really, look, I tell you what, here's the keys to my car and my house. You'll find my wife in bed. You can just go in and fuck her every so often. She won't mind. Because from the sound of what you got in mind, you want to step into my life and, screw the granny out of it,
And how did that all end up then? Did he carry on and doing his own thing, or did you carry on working together?
No, we carry on working together, but I did explain, and I broke it down. I said, there's nothing about what you're saying that isn't what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I do. Really, you'd have to build. Oh, you can charge me a fee for it. I mean, people still don't fucking see that.
Yeah.
That you've done them a favor. He ended up trying to do something, and it all turned to shit.
Yeah.
I can't step back in even. But it was the same guy. He was the one who ended up with this Thai traveling salesman. And I did see, this was my own arrogance in a way. He came to me and said, look, I need your help. I said, well, advice anyway. Didn't like to say the word help because it sounds like there's money coming into it. All right, some advice. I think this guy's being followed. Well, it sounds like he would be if he's coming into the country every 4 months loaded to the gunnels. And they haven't picked up on it yet. Right, well, I need to pick it up. So I went down for a meeting with this guy. And sure enough, police were all around it. And I was pretty sure that they were part of my task force.
Was this the part which was featured in your film where you met in the hospital?
Chris Mercer wrote it in a somewhat different way in the Mercy Hospital drop off.
Because this guy was, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he one of the biggest smugglers in the world at the time? And he was bringing in the product. He
was quite, it was quite greedy. He in the sense that he didn't want anybody else taking it around. Look, greedy is one word, I suppose. But I can understand the problems if you let it out of your sight. You'll hear lots of stories about where it ended up.
So you met up with him, and was it actually as per the film as well? Then, so you actually met in the hospital.
Close to it, but they didn't really detail it. We went out to try and identify who was doing the following, and it looked very clearly it was a federal operation. And now that meant their radios would be on 468 to 50 megahertz. So the only place I knew that wouldn't allow that kind of radio transmission was down by the hospital, because it was kind of blocked off because of their machinery in those days, their scanners and whatnot. I put out a couple of cars in hiding spots around the area to switch to. So it was a bit like the film that he was told to go to the hospital. I went in one way. Michael came in the other and was waiting for my signal by radio to tell him to come and pick it up. He didn't want to, the Thai guy didn't really want to take it on, that there was so much heat everywhere. But he finally did. So we walked out the back towards the emergency.
So you
entrance.
did an exchange in front of all the police officers there observing.
Yeah.
There was the exchange.
Because Michael originally said, "Look, I'm going to dump this guy. I'm going to leave him. He's too hot." But I thought, well, wait a minute. I said, let's imagine that happens. What do you think the police are going to do? They're going to run in there and arrest him with it. Now, they won't be happy just with that. They'll want to arrest everybody he's ever connected with. And so you and I will be dragged in on a conspiracy case. So that's out. There wasn't any other choice to
exchange. Yeah, you had to go ahead with.
Yeah, it was the only safe thing to do. Now, as it turned out, he because he was Michael's man. Oh, I did say one thing to him. Look, Michael, I said, this is a bit odd. The guy, because we did the switch. I grabbed the stuff, threw it into Michael's car. He reversed out backwards, nearly skittled a couple of people. I took Hassan, jumped him over a fence at the back. We went to another car, drove it out from where it was. It was a street that had, those poles that come out of the ground when they want to make it a dead-end street, and they got little padlocks on them. They had those, so I pulled those up to block it out. And I could see a couple of trucks trying to close off the other side of the street. But we got away, and I sent him back to his hotel a little bit reluctantly. I thought they might try and grab him anyway, but they'd be licking their wounds that night, so they wouldn't do it straight away. But apparently they had a whole lot of, they'd booked 20 interview rooms for that night.
Because they thought they were going to bust you, yeah.
Oh, they thought this was it. This was their big day.
So from that point onwards, do you think that's where they kind of had a bit of a personal vendetta for you, because you cheated them, kind of? You were one step ahead, made them look so stupid, and then that was it. Then from then it was the personal vendetta to get.
Well, possibly so. And I think, and I did say to Michael, I said, they're not going to like this, so it might be time to get out of Dodge City, I think.